Christmas Eve always felt cold in our house, but that year the cold settled into my bones. It wasn't just the draft slipping through the window panes or the tired old furnace rattling in the basement, it was something deeper, quieter, and heavier than the Ohio winter itself. I remember standing on the porch, boots crunching in the thin layer of snow, my arms aching from the weight of grocery bags and a cheap, wrinkled gift bag looped around my wrist. Maybe I should have seen it coming, the way the lights never worked and nobody smiled for real, but some things you only understand after it's too late. I nudged open the door, greeted by a waft of reheated ham and the acrid tang of last year's burnt pine candles. The living room looked the same as always, sagging couch, threadbare rug, and the wallpaper peeling in the corners like it was too tired to hold on. The Christmas tree slouched in its usual place, branches weighed down with cheap tinsel and flickering string lights that blinked like a warning. For a moment, I stood there and just listened, the hollow tick of the wall clock, the muted TV from the kitchen, the hum of silence that filled up every empty space. "Hey, Em," my mom called, her voice thin. She appeared in the archway, hair up in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't hide. "You're late. Dinner's almost ready." I managed a smile and lifted the grocery bags. Traffic was bad. Got caught behind a plow on 3rd. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was I'd sat in the car for 10 minutes after work, staring at the glow of the dashboard, dreading the walk inside. She took the bags from me, rifling through for the ham and instant potatoes. I saw the receipt flutter out, a few dollars left in my account until payday, but at least there'd be enough for the week. "You didn't have to get presents, honey," she said, voice half gratitude, half apology. "It's just something small," I replied. "For Tyler. And some socks for Dad." I didn't mention that I'd picked up a dollar store mug for her too, the kind with snowflakes and a cheerful bluebird, even though she insisted every year not to bother. As I stepped into the living room, I saw my father already seated at the head of the table, clutching a glass of cheap red wine, eyes fixed on the ceiling light as if searching for answers. His face was drawn, lines deeper this winter. The bottle beside him was already half empty. "Evening, Emily," he muttered, barely glancing up. "Evening, Dad," I said, setting the gifts beside Tyler's plate. Tyler was there too, hunched over his phone, headphones draped around his neck. He looked up, offering a small, nervous smile. At 17, he was taller than me now, but there was something fragile about the way he sat, shoulders rounded, always waiting for the next storm. Mom moved around us, bustling with plates and nervous energy. "Let's eat before it gets cold," she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She handed out the ham and potatoes, and we sat together, 4 people orbiting one another, pretending for just a moment that we were a family. The meal started like every other, a chorus of clinking forks and the faint croon of a Christmas song on the radio. Conversation came in fits and starts, my mother asking about my shift, busy night, my father grumbling about the neighbor's Christmas lights, Tyler mumbling about finals. I tried to lighten the mood, sliding a small wrapped box toward Tyler. "You're opening this one early," I said, winking. He glanced at Dad, who was staring into his glass, then back at me. "Thanks, Em." He opened it slowly, a set of sketch pencils I'd saved up for after noticing the corners of his notebooks filled with drawings. His face lit up for half a second before he caught Dad's frown and looked away. I watched my father as he poured himself another glass, the sound sharp in the silence. My mother tried to fill the gaps, talking about a sale at the grocery store or a funny student from her part-time job at the library, but her voice trailed off, and nobody picked up the thread. I reached under the table for my phone, opening the utility app, electric, water, internet, paying the bills with practiced taps, making sure the heat stayed on, that Tyler could do his homework, that Dad could keep the TV humming late into the night. Somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the overcooked ham, the tension sharpened. My father set his fork down with a thud, the sound so sudden that I nearly dropped my phone. "You know, Emily," he said, voice flat and heavy, "I've been thinking." I looked up, pulse hammering in my ears. "About what?" He leaned forward, eyes locking with mine, as if daring me to flinch. "You're a burden here. You can't live here anymore." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The words hung there, heavy and irrevocable, cutting through the room sharper than the cold outside. My mother let out a shaky laugh, hoping, maybe, that he was only joking. But the look on his face told us all this was no joke. Tyler stared at me, fork halfway to his mouth, eyes wide and confused. I swallowed, feeling the familiar ache of helplessness in my chest. "What did you say?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. "You heard me." Dad's voice was low, almost tired. "You've stayed here long enough. This is my house, and I'm saying enough is enough. You need to move out." Silence swallowed us. Mom looked down at her lap, twisting a napkin in her fingers. Tyler's hand trembled as he set his fork down. The string lights on the tree flickered, reflecting in the window, blue, red, blue, red. I wanted to argue, to remind them of every bill I'd paid, every winter I'd kept the lights on, every time I'd come home with groceries instead of new clothes for myself. But my throat closed up, and all that came out was a thin, bitter laugh. "Okay," I said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Dad seemed to relax, as if he'd finally won some silent war. Mom didn't look at me. Tyler tried to speak, but Dad cut him off with a glare. I sat there, staring at the sagging Christmas tree and the peeling wallpaper, the whole house feeling colder than it had all winter. I realized, with a sudden, hollow certainty, that I was finally, truly, unwanted. Sometimes, I think people don't see what they're doing until there's nothing left to break. Maybe that's how families fall apart, not with a fight, but with a quiet, tired surrender. As the dinner ended, I cleared my plate, walked past the cheap tinsel drooping from the banister, and slipped upstairs. I left the sounds of forks and silence behind, knowing that by this time tomorrow, even those small rituals would belong to someone else. I always thought my life would change on some distant future day, not in the space between a ruined dinner and midnight. But as I climbed the stairs that Christmas Eve, the world as I knew it felt like it was ending not with a bang, but with the quiet hush of a house that had finally given up. My bedroom door creaked open, and for a second I just stood there, breathing in the old familiar mix of lavender from a half-empty candle, faded laundry, and the musty cold that had seeped in through the drafty window. The moon cast long, pale stripes across the floor, making the room look smaller, lonelier. I reached for the lamp by my bed, but the bulb flickered and died, a silent metaphor for everything else that was burning out in this place. The first thing I did was pull my suitcase from under the bed, the old black one I'd bought at Goodwill after my second paycheck. It smelled faintly of soap and lemon polish, and the zipper snagged on the corner like always. I started with the things I knew I couldn't leave behind, my work slacks and blouses, a worn stack of journals, my grandmother's silver locket, and the chipped mug I'd bought at the Christmas market last year. I set it all out on the bed in neat, lonely piles, each item a piece of the person I was trying so hard not to lose. For a moment, I just sat there, looking around the room. The faded posters on the wall, the bookshelf crowded with cheap paperbacks, the collection of birthday cards from years when everyone still tried. In the top drawer, I found my old red scarf, a Christmas gift from when I was 12, before the world grew sharp edges. The scarf was faded, one end unraveled, but as I wrapped it carefully and tucked it into the corner of my suitcase, it felt like packing away hope itself. The house was silent, except for the television murmuring downstairs. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone. I scrolled through the list of bill accounts, electricity, water, internet, even the streaming service Dad never learned to use. One by one, I opened the settings and removed my card info, heart pounding with each confirmation. I wondered if they'd notice, or if the house would simply slip further into darkness until someone realized the lifeline was gone. A gentle knock startled me. Tyler stood in the doorway, his silhouette uncertain in the dim blue light. "Hey," he said, his voice low, almost afraid to disturb the peace. I forced a smile. "You should be asleep." He shook his head, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. He looked so much older than 17 just then, eyes red, shoulders tense, as if he were carrying the weight I was about to put down. "Are you really leaving?" he asked, and for a moment he was a little boy again, standing in the doorway with scraped knees and hope in his eyes. I nodded, my throat tight. Dad meant it. He doesn't want me here. Tyler sat on the edge of the bed, running his fingers over the scarf. But who's going to pay for the bills? What if they forget? What if? I touched his hand gently. They'll figure it out, or they won't. It's not my job anymore, Ty. I can't be everything for everyone. You need to finish high school. That's your job right now. He looked at me, a storm of emotion flickering across his face. I wish I could go with you. I hate it here. I know, I whispered, swallowing the lump in my throat. But you're still a kid, at least on paper. Just hold on a little longer, okay? Once you're 18, you can do whatever you want. I'll help you. He was quiet for a long moment. I could see him fighting back tears, refusing to let them fall. Will you text me? He asked, his voice almost breaking. Every day, I promised. And if you ever need me, really need me, you call, no matter what time. He nodded, and suddenly wrapped his arms around me, hugging so tightly it almost hurt. I hugged him back, wishing I could fix things, wishing I could take him with me, but knowing that sometimes love means letting go, even when it aches. He pulled away and wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. Don't forget about me, he whispered. Never, I said, and I meant it. He slipped out of the room, closing the door behind him. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment longer, just listening to the house. The pipes groaned, the refrigerator hummed, the TV carried on in the living room like nothing had changed. I looked around one last time, making sure I hadn't left anything behind. I zipped the suitcase closed, feeling the weight of it, heavy with clothes, memories, and the last threads of childhood. Downstairs, the house was dark except for the flickering light from the television. Mom's silhouette moved across the kitchen. She didn't look up as I walked past, didn't say anything. I could smell the leftover ham, already cooling on the counter. For a moment, I wanted to say goodbye, to get one last word of comfort, but the words stuck and so did I. I opened the front door and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit me like a wake-up call, stinging my cheeks and filling my lungs. I looked back at the house, the peeling paint, the sagging porch, the window where Tyler's light still glowed. No one came to say goodbye. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the suitcase, and walked down the driveway, each step crunching through the fresh snow. I was free, but I was trembling. As I reached the street, I looked up at the silent sky. The moon was bright, cold, and constant, and for a moment I felt something like hope settle in my chest. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this: sometimes you have to leave everything behind to find out what's worth holding on to. And sometimes, hope is just a red scarf, wrapped away for better days. It was strange how a friend's couch could feel warmer than your own bed. Marissa's apartment, tucked above a bakery on an old side street, was barely big enough for the two of us, but that night it felt like the whole world had shrunk to the glow of her living room lamp and the soft hum of the radiator. Maybe this was how starting over always looked, awkward, with popcorn bowls and borrowed blankets, the air full of someone else's laundry soap and hope. My suitcase, battered from too many moves, sat by the front door. I watched as Marissa danced around piles of unfolded laundry, clearing space on the couch. "It's not fancy," she said, her voice bright, "but it beats the Motel 6. She grinned, trying to make the heaviness seem lighter, and I loved her for that. She pressed a chipped mug of tea into my hand, curling up beside me with her knees to her chest. The TV flickered, playing "It's a Wonderful Life," the sound low enough that we could talk over it but loud enough to fill the empty spaces. I found myself letting out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. For the first time in weeks, nobody was counting on me to fix things. Nobody expected me to hold the house together with little more than a paycheck and hope. We talked about nothing and everything. She asked about work, about Tyler, about my plans. I shrugged, pretending I had some, tracing my finger over the pattern of the throw blanket. "I guess this is what starting over feels like," I said, half laughing. "Popcorn for dinner and sleeping on a couch." Marissa smiled, nudging my shoulder. "Honey, popcorn is always dinner if you want it to be. The real question is, do you want butter or the weird chili powder I keep forgetting to use?" Her lightness made it easier, like maybe the world wasn't ending, just shifting. After she went to bed, I stayed up a little longer. The apartment was so quiet compared to home, no TV blaring from the next room, no footsteps pacing in the kitchen, no muted arguments leaking through thin walls. I took out my phone and started the list: utility companies, streaming services, bill pay sites. Each click, remove card, cancel account, update password, was both an act of self-preservation and an admission that I wasn't coming back. I hesitated on the last one, my name listed as responsible party, and let my thumb hover before hitting confirm. A little guilt crept in, cold and sharp. I pictured Tyler at the kitchen table, Mom with her endless to-do lists, Dad flipping through the channels. Would they notice the heater wasn't humming, the Wi-Fi blinking out? But then I remembered how easily I'd been told to leave, and the guilt faded, replaced by something lighter. Relief. I set my phone on the coffee table and looked around the room. Marissa had left a mug of cocoa for me beside the couch, no note, just steam curling into the air, a silent promise that I wasn't alone. I wrapped up in the blanket, the sounds of the old pipes and distant traffic lulling me to sleep. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and bread baking downstairs. My phone was buzzing, 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 texts from Tyler, 1 voicemail from Dad that I deleted before listening. The most recent message was from Mom, the kind that made my stomach twist: "Emily, the power's out. The internet's not working. Your dad's furious. What did you do?" I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat at the tiny kitchen table with Marissa, eating toast and sipping bitter coffee, feeling the world shift beneath me. I watched the light spill through the window and thought about how easy it was to become invisible in your own family, until you stopped being useful. Marissa, sensing my mood, started telling a story about her boss confusing cumin and cinnamon, making an entire batch of chili taste like Christmas cookies. I laughed, grateful for the distraction, and let her fill the air with chatter until my phone buzzed again. By evening, the calls had turned into a barrage of missed connections, voicemails growing more desperate, texts piling up. "Call me back, Emily," Mom's voice pleaded through the static. "We don't know what to do. Why are you doing this to us?" There was fear there, but also a bitterness that stung. That night, after Marissa went to bed, my phone rang again. The screen glowed with Mom's number, and this time I answered. Her voice was raw, tired, and tangled with tears. Emily, everything's falling apart. The power, your father's yelling. Tyler's cold. What did you do? I sat there, heart pounding, watching snow gather on the windowsill. I took a breath, steadying my voice. Mom, I didn't do anything to you. I just stopped paying for everything. I can't keep being the only one holding it all together. You can take care of yourselves now. There was a long silence, broken only by her shaky breathing. But, how are we supposed to? You'll figure it out, I said, softer this time. You have to. I hung up before she could answer, hands trembling as I set the phone down. For a long moment, I watched the snow swirling outside, wondering if I'd just made things worse, or finally better. I turned off the lamp and wrapped myself in the borrowed blanket, Coco cooling beside me. For the first time in years, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, this was what starting over was supposed to feel like, hard, messy, and just warm enough to keep going. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was an emergency, or just another demand. After Christmas, I thought the hard part was behind me, but January arrived with a raw coldness that seeped into everything. I'd imagined that breaking free would be quiet. I hadn't counted on the aftershocks. My days became a blur of work and worry. At my desk in the insurance office, I stared at spreadsheets while my phone trembled with new notifications, missed calls from Mom, angry voicemails, desperate texts from Tyler. Some were just static and guilt, others veiled threats wrapped up as questions. The worst were the security alerts, failed login attempt. Suspicious device. Again and again, at all hours. I changed my passwords, updated my info, but the messages kept coming. One afternoon, Marissa poked her head over our cubicle wall. You okay? You've been staring at that same cell for 5 minutes. She didn't say anything else, just slid a candy bar onto my desk and returned to her work. I smiled, grateful for her quiet kindness. Sometimes, the smallest gestures feel like anchors. But peace never lasted long. That evening, I walked back to Marissa's apartment with my phone lighting up the whole way. Tyler's text, Dad's digging through Mom's old notebooks. I think he's looking for your passwords. He keeps saying you owe him. My stomach tightened. Dad never let things go, not money, not slights, not people. I texted Tyler back, don't get involved. If he asks for anything, tell him you don't know. Tyler replied, he's really losing it, Em. Be careful. Mom's scared. The words lingered long after the conversation ended. At the apartment, Marissa was already home, making pasta and humming off-key. I watched her move around the kitchen, every action so easy, so normal. I wished for a moment I could just slip into her life, someone whose biggest problem was overcooked noodles or a missed TV show. Rough day? She asked, pushing a bowl toward me. Something like that. I tried to smile. I told her bits and pieces, skimming the surface, passwords, bills, family drama. She nodded, not prying. You know, sometimes you have to let people figure out their own mess, she said. It's not your job to save everyone. Her words stuck with me. Later, I sat on the edge of the pull-out couch and set up two-factor authentication on every account I owned, bank, email, utilities, streaming, even my grocery app. I made a list of new passwords, long strings of numbers and symbols, scribbled them on a sticky note I tucked deep into my wallet. My heart raced as I deleted old recovery emails, unlinked devices, closed accounts I didn't need. The more I tightened my online world, the more I realized just how much access I'd given away. Tyler texted late, Dad says he's going to get back what's his. He found an old credit card statement with your name. Mom's crying in the kitchen. I typed and deleted half a dozen responses before settling on, lock your door tonight. Keep your phone close. If anything gets weird, call me, no matter what. I wanted to protect him, but there was only so much I could do from a distance. The voicemails from Mom grew sharper, full of accusation. Emily, why would you do this to us? Your father is furious. We can't even pay the water bill now. This isn't right. I let them pile up, deleting most without listening. The guilt gnawed at me, but I reminded myself, they were the ones who told me to leave. You can't heal in the same place that broke you, or so I kept repeating as a mantra. Dad never called, but the threats filtered through Tyler and the failed logins. I'll make her pay. She owes this family. It stung, even though I knew the words weren't really about me. They were about control, about pride, about a man who had lost his grip on everything except his own anger. That night, as the wind rattled the windows, Tyler's final message glowed on my screen. He's losing it, Em. Be careful. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my lap, heart pounding. I glanced at Marissa's closed door, the quiet hum of her sleep machine drifting through the wall. Safe, for now, but boundaries can only do so much when your past keeps finding ways to slip through the cracks. I started a new ritual that night, something small to keep the darkness at bay. Before bed, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote down 3 things I was grateful for, even the hard things. A friend who makes pasta. A brother who still believes in me. The strength to change a password, even when it hurts. It wasn't much, but it helped. Some days, the only way through is to remind yourself what's still yours. When I shut off my phone that night, I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. I wondered if boundaries could ever really keep family out, or if I'd spend my life learning where to build the next wall. But as sleep crept in, I decided that sometimes, the cost of cutting ties is the only price worth paying for peace. Some ghosts don't wait for invitations, they bang on your door until you answer. That was the kind of night it was, cold, rainy, the wind scraping down the alley behind Marissa's apartment as if it, too, was looking for a way inside. We sat cross-legged on her living room floor, takeout containers spread between us, lo mein for her, pad thai for me, fortune cookies waiting like unopened promises. The glow of the TV and the smell of soy sauce made the place feel almost like a real home, a warm hiding place from the world outside. I thought I could keep my old life out. I was wrong. Marissa was mid-story about a disastrous date involving karaoke and a surprise nosebleed when the pounding started. Not the normal knock of a neighbor, not even the heavy thump of a delivery driver. This was insistent, angry, 3 sharp bangs, then silence, then a fist again, harder. The plastic fork slipped from my hand. Marissa froze, eyes wide. You expecting anyone? She whispered. I shook my head, heart crawling up into my throat. Then came the voice, muffled but unmistakable, cutting through the rain and wind like a knife. Emily. Open up. I know you're in there. My whole body went cold. I recognized my father's voice, raw with anger and drink. He hammered again. Don't you ignore me, girl. You think you can just walk away? After everything I did for you? Marissa reached for her phone, fingers trembling. I'm calling the police, she mouthed, already dialing. I stood, fighting the urge to collapse, and moved toward the door. My hand shook as I checked the deadbolt, making sure it was locked, even though I knew there was no real safety behind a simple chain and plywood. Go away, Dad, I shouted, forcing my voice steady. You can't come in. He pounded harder. You owe this family, Emily. You think you're so grown up, cutting us off, leaving us in the dark. You're not better than us. My mind raced. What would he do if he got in? Would he shout? Break things? I thought of Tyler at home, Marissa behind me, the promises I'd made to keep myself, and those I cared about, safe. The phone in Marissa's hand was a lifeline, her voice quiet and measured as she gave our address to the dispatcher. Yes, he's her father. Yes, he's yelling, won't leave. We're scared. Please hurry. Richard kept up the barrage, words slurred and hateful, raining accusations like hail on the battered door. You think you can cut me off? I'm your father. You owe me, you selfish brat. I pressed my palms flat to the door, willing myself not to shake. You pushed me out, Dad, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper at first, then louder as I repeated it. That was your choice. Not mine. A beat of silence. Then another pounding, harder still, echoing through the small apartment. Marissa turned up the volume on the TV, a silly comedy now roaring in the background, desperate to cover the shouts that seeped under the door. She put a hand on my shoulder, steady and warm, and I felt something solid settle in me, a stubborn refusal to be afraid. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, bouncing off the rain-soaked buildings. My father must have heard them, too, because his shouts faltered, replaced by a low, muttered string of curses. I peered through the peephole and saw the flashing blue lights reflected in the wet pavement. Relief warred with shame in my chest. The police knocked, their voices calm and professional. Sir, step away from the door. Ma'am, is everything okay inside? I opened the door just a crack, heart pounding. 2 officers stood with hands ready on their belts, my father scowling between them, shoulders hunched, eyes glassy. She's my daughter, he spat. She owes me a conversation. One officer nodded politely but didn't budge. Not like this, sir. You need to leave. If you come back here or cause trouble, we'll have to press charges. My father glared at me, then at Marissa, then at the officers. He looked small in the hallway, suddenly shrunken by the rain and the blue light. You think you're so righteous, Emily, he growled, voice rough with years of disappointment. Just wait. Family isn't so easy to shake. He let himself be led away, still muttering threats. The officers promised to circle back later, reassured us that we'd done the right thing. The door closed, and for a moment there was just the hiss of rain against the windows and the sitcom laugh track echoing through the room. Marissa looked at me, her face pale but determined. You okay? She asked softly, nudging the remote toward me. I nodded, though my hands were shaking. Yeah. I think so. Without another word, she put on an old favorite, the kind of goofy movie with talking animals and impossible happy endings. She nudged the takeout back into my hands and curled up beside me on the couch, her presence a barrier against the fear that still lingered. We ate in silence, the TV a comforting wall between the world outside and the fragile peace inside. Even after the sirens faded, I knew he wasn't really gone, not from my mind, or my life. There are some ghosts you can't banish with a locked door or a police warning. But sitting there, watching Marissa laugh at a cartoon penguin trying to tap dance, I felt the smallest spark of hope. Maybe you can't choose the family you're born into, but you can choose who you let in when the night gets cold. Sometimes the only way to feel safe is to keep moving, even if you're not sure where you'll land. The days after Dad's visit stretched long and uneasy, the winter light as thin as my patience. I tiptoed around Marissa's apartment, half-packed suitcases and grocery bags cluttering the hallway, heart jumping at every knock or ring of my phone. My old life kept trying to catch up with me, and I couldn't tell if I was escaping or just postponing the inevitable. I used to think home was a place. Now I knew it was peace of mind. It happened on a Monday morning, the kind of day where the sky was the color of dishwater and nothing seemed to move. I was stirring sugar into my coffee when my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. You think you can hide forever? You'll pay for this. My breath caught. No name, but I recognized the pattern, the clipped sentences, the threat that felt both hollow and heavy. Richard. For all his bluster in person, he was even more relentless in the shadows. I stared at the screen for a long moment, anger and fear wrestling inside me. The old me might have ignored it, let it gnaw at me in secret. But this time, I took a screenshot and sent it to the police, attaching the incident number from last week. Another threat, same sender, I typed. My hand shook, but I hit send. One small act of standing up for myself, an act I wished I'd learned years ago. Packing became my new ritual, each box a chapter closed, each bag zipped shut with both relief and sadness. Marissa flitted around, folding towels, making lists, insisting I take the good mugs and not just the chipped ones. We danced around the truth, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. She slipped a photo booth strip into my suitcase, us in stupid sunglasses, mouths open in laughter, and made me promise to meet her at Roxy's Coffee every Thursday, or else I'll hunt you down and drag you back by the scarf. We ate takeout on the floor one last time, chopsticks clinking against cardboard. You're braver than you think, Em, she said, her voice thick but determined. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. I hugged her hard, grateful for every quiet kindness she'd given without asking for anything in return. I'll text as soon as I'm settled. And you have to keep me posted about karaoke night, no excuses. I'm holding you to that, she said, wiping at her eyes, trying to look casual about it. The Uber ride across town was short, but I watched the city roll by like it was a new country. Each stoplight felt like a checkpoint, one more boundary between the person I was and the person I might become. Nora's apartment was a world apart from the chaos I'd left behind. The entryway was lined with plants, fat-leaved pothos and shy little succulents, and the air smelled faintly of vanilla and clean laundry. Nora met me at the door, her smile calm and inviting. Welcome home, Emily, she said simply, as if it were the easiest thing in the world to offer someone shelter. She showed me the spare room, all soft lamplight and shelves lined with books. The bedspread was green, cheerful, and there was a tiny desk by the window with a notepad and pen already waiting. There's coffee in the kitchen, and a fresh towel in the bathroom. Make yourself at home, really, she insisted. I set my suitcase on the bed and breathed in, slow and deep. The quiet here was different, not the silence of waiting for the next crisis, but a restful hush that made space for new thoughts. My phone buzzed with a message from Tyler, made it to second period. Math quiz was brutal. Miss you already. I smiled, fingers flying over the keys. You've got this, Ty. I'm always just a text away. Alone at last, I unpacked a few essentials, a sweater, my old red scarf, the photo from Marissa. My first act of ownership was small but sacred. I brewed a cup of coffee, the kind that tasted just faintly burnt but felt like comfort in my hands, and lit the cheapest vanilla candle from the dollar store. The scent filled the air, mixing with the green of the plants and the hush of a place that didn't expect anything from me. I sat at the desk, sipping coffee, watching the late afternoon light soften through Nora's windows. For the first time in months, I felt something close to safe, still uncertain, still wary, but less like I was one wrong move from losing everything. When evening came, I texted Marissa a picture of the candle and my feet in new fuzzy socks. First night in a stranger's spare room. I owe you big time. She replied with a string of heart emojis and a photo of herself in her pajamas, holding up a bowl of popcorn. New tradition? Maybe, I thought. Maybe all of this could be new. As I lay in bed that night, the sheets crisp and unfamiliar, I listened to the quiet, a real quiet, unbroken by shouting or footsteps or fear. The weight of the day settled over me, not entirely gone, but lighter for having been carried this far. I closed my eyes and wondered, as I drifted toward sleep, if I could ever stop running. Or maybe the real trick was learning which places, and which people, were finally safe enough to rest. For tonight, it was enough to just breathe, candle flickering on the nightstand, hope curling up beside me in the dark. I thought moving again would finally bring me peace, but sometimes ghosts follow you no matter how far you go. Nora's apartment had a way of making each morning feel new, big windows spilling sunlight onto pale wood floors, green leaves tumbling out of every pot and planter. There were days, in the soft quiet between dawn and coffee, when I almost believed I'd left my old life behind. I told myself I'd stop looking over my shoulder, maybe someday, I'd believe it. March arrived with shy blue skies and the promise of spring, but I still woke some nights to the phantom ring of my old phone, the echo of Dad's angry voice bouncing around inside my head. Some things took more than a change of address to shake loose. Still, I tried to claim what peace I could. First on my list, file an official police report about the threats. I sat at Nora's little kitchen table, the sun warm on my back, and told the officer everything, the calls, the messages, the pattern of Dad's words. He asked if I felt safe. I said yes, but my hands trembled as I signed the digital form, sending a piece of my fear out into the world with every click. Then came the rest of my new life checklist: close the old checking account, open a new one with just my name. Replace my phone. Set up two-factor authentication on everything, again. At the end of it, I felt like I'd built a little fortress around myself, digital walls instead of emotional ones. Nora was the best kind of roommate, quiet, present, never intrusive but always near when I needed her. She brought home cookbooks from the library and left them on the counter, open to recipes she thought I'd like. She showed me how to make scones on a rainy Saturday, flour dusting her glasses, and later that night, she poured us both mugs of honey tea, neither of us saying much, just sharing the hush. Sometimes she left donuts by the coffee maker in the morning, or a funny sticky note on the fridge, plants watered. You, too? But the world outside those four walls still clawed its way in. My phone filled with voicemails from Mom, her voice sliding between apology and blame so fast it made me dizzy. Emily, I just want you to call me. It's so hard here. I know we hurt you, but you hurt us, too. The next message, tighter: we can't pay the bills now. I hope you're happy. Your father's furious. Sometimes I deleted them as soon as they arrived, but sometimes I listened, trying to pick out the mother I remembered from the storm of her new resentment. Tyler's texts were my lifeline, each one a window into the house I'd left behind. Dad and Mom had a fight in the kitchen again. Cables off, Wi-Fi's dead. I think they blame each other now. Miss you. I replied as best I could, hang in there, Ty. Not much longer. Some nights, I wanted to drive back, just to check on him, but I knew it wouldn't help either of us. One afternoon, Marissa messaged a photo of herself in sunglasses, holding a massive iced coffee. Survived a week without you. Proud? She kept me tethered to something lighter, reminding me that laughter was still allowed, even in the middle of all this unraveling. By the third week of March, I'd almost managed to let my guard down. Nora and I built small routines, baking scones, sharing quiet late-night tea. On Sundays, she lent me books about wildflowers or faraway cities, and we'd sit side by side on the couch, each lost in a different world. The city outside was waking up again, kids shouting on bikes, neighbors dragging lawn chairs out into little strips of sun. Then, just as I started to believe in safety, I went downstairs one morning and found my parking spot empty. I stood blinking in the bright air, keys in hand, brain refusing to process what my eyes already knew. My car was gone. For a moment, I wondered if I'd forgotten where I parked. Maybe it had been towed? But Nora's lot was never full, and my permit was up to date. I circled the block, double-checking every corner, but my blue sedan had vanished. Panic crashed over me. I fumbled through the possibilities: stolen, towed, mistaken identity. Then I remembered the spare key. The one I'd left in a bowl on the kitchen counter back at my parents' house, just in case Tyler ever needed it. I hadn't thought to get it back. A cold certainty settled in my chest. I called the non-emergency police number, filed a report. "Any idea who might have taken it?" the officer asked, polite but tired. "Family," I said, my voice flat. "It's complicated." That evening, I sat with Nora in the kitchen, the kettle steaming between us. She poured tea, warm and steady, and set a lemon scone on my plate without a word. The house was filled with plant shadows and gentle lamplight, but my mind was back in that old, crowded living room, hearing Dad's voice, Mom's bitterness, Tyler's quiet fear. I wondered if safety was just an illusion, or if some doors never really shut behind you. I tried to thank Nora for all her patience, for letting me bring this mess into her life. She only shook her head, smiling gently. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Everyone's running from something. You're not alone." I believed her, but as I stared at the space where my car should have been, I knew the past wasn't done with me, not yet. My new life wasn't as safe as I thought. Some ghosts can pick locks, or follow you through any door. As I turned off the lights and slipped into bed that night, the taste of lemon and honey lingering on my tongue, I promised myself not to give up on peace, not now, not ever. But I slept with one eye on the future, and one ear listening for the past. There's nothing quite like realizing your own family sees your things as theirs. I got the news in the most ordinary way, a call from Tyler, hushed and urgent. "Emily, Mom's driving your car. She took it out this morning, said she was running errands. And, your laptop's gone. She sold it. Said she needed the money." I sat on the edge of Nora's sofa, every muscle tightening, that old ache in my chest returning like a bruise pressed by someone else's hand. I'd learned how to stand up for myself, but that didn't make it any less exhausting. I was tired of fighting, tired of being surprised at how deep the entitlement ran. But I couldn't let it slide. First, I started gathering evidence. Tyler texted me a photo of the car parked in front of the old house, the license plate visible, the dashboard cluttered with Mom's things. He sent a screenshot of a grocery receipt with her name on it and a timestamp from my car's GPS tracker. "She keeps the keys in her purse," he added. "She told me not to tell you." The laptop was harder. Tyler said he saw a Craigslist ad with the right make and color. "She needed cash for Dad's medicine," she says. "Or maybe to keep the lights on another week." I tried not to think about how many pieces of my life had vanished for someone else's comfort. At the police station, the process was slow and clinical. I sat with a weary officer who asked careful questions and nodded at my stack of screenshots and receipts. "Family theft is tricky," he said, tapping out a report. "But the car is in your name. And if your mother can't prove ownership, we can intervene." A few hours later, I was back in my old neighborhood, my heart thudding against my ribs. The Parker house looked smaller than I remembered, paint peeling, porch sags deeper than before. I waited for the officer to knock, breathing shallowly, wishing I was anywhere but there. Diane opened the door, surprise flickering across her face before she scolded into something tired and polite. "Emily," she said, her voice thin. I didn't expect to see you. I kept my hands at my sides, fingers curled tight. You have my car, Mom. And my laptop. Her eyes darted to the officer beside me. It was just sitting there, she said, voice rising with desperation. You weren't using it. We needed groceries, medicine. It's not like you're some stranger. I shook my head, feeling both angry and deeply sad. That's not how it works, Mom. It's still stealing. Tyler hovered in the background, shoulders hunched, eyes wide. I could see how torn he was, wanting to protect me, wanting to disappear from the tension. The officer spoke calmly. Ma'am, we need you to return the vehicle to your daughter. She's documented the ownership, and it's her legal property. As for the laptop, you'll need to disclose who purchased it. Diane looked at me, pleading now. Emily, you don't understand what it's been like. Your father, he's not himself. I just needed a little help. I wanted to comfort her, to say I understood. But I also knew that understanding didn't mean surrender. You could have asked, I said, voice steady. Instead, you took. That's not love. That's just survival at someone else's expense. For a moment, Diane's face crumpled. I'm sorry, she whispered, but there was no weight behind it, just exhaustion and defeat. We walked out to the curb. My car sat in the drive, a little dirtier than I remembered, a crumpled grocery bag on the floor and a forgotten scarf of Tyler's on the back seat. As I unlocked the door, I found an old photo tucked in the console, me and Tyler at a county fair, grinning into the sun. The memory was sharp and sweet, and for a moment, I remembered what it felt like to have hope that family could mean safety. The officer warned Diane, if you attempt to take your daughter's property again, or if there are any further incidents, we will press charges. She nodded, numb. I could see the lines of worry etching deeper into her face. The laptop, I knew, was gone for good. Sold, erased, someone else's now. I let it go. Some losses you have to release, no matter how much you want to hold on. Driving away, I tried to breathe in the sense of power I'd earned. I'd stood my ground, refused to be manipulated by guilt or need. But there was no satisfaction in it, just a dull ache, a sense of something lost that I couldn't get back. That night, back in Nora's apartment, I set the photo of me and Tyler on my desk, a bittersweet anchor to the good parts of the past. I made a cup of tea, curled up in bed, and let myself cry, not for the car or the laptop, but for the thousand small kindnesses I wished my family could have shown, for the trust that had been chipped away until there was nothing left. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number, you'll regret this. No name, no context, but I didn't need either. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, then deleted it, saving the screenshot for the police. The fight wasn't over. But I was different now, tired, maybe, but not weak. I was learning, day by day, how to defend what was mine, and how to let go of what I couldn't save. Some chapters don't close with a slam, they just fade, quiet as dust. I didn't notice the last time I walked by the old house or the final time I let one of Mom's voicemails go unheard. The end of things crept in gently, so quiet it almost let me believe nothing had really changed. Home wasn't a place I could return to, but a promise I made to myself and Tyler. We deserved better, even if we had to build it piece by piece. March rolled into April, and I found myself with keys to a new life. My own name on a lease, just mine, no cosigners, no safety nets but what I'd stitched together from hard-won paychecks and Marissa's endless encouragement. The apartment was hardly more than a studio, a sliver of light, a battered futon, a little galley kitchen that always smelled faintly of coffee and soap. But it was mine. I carried in my suitcase a box of books, my old red scarf, and a tiny cactus I'd bought at the garden store down the block. The clerk said, "It survives anything," and I thought, good, I need something else in my life that knows how to endure. Nora and Marissa both came for moving day, bearing housewarming gifts, a thrifted coffee mug, a loaf of bread, a candle that smelled like vanilla cookies. Nora stayed to help me hang a few prints on the walls. "It's good to have a fresh start," she said, carefully straightening a frame. I set up my new phone, watching the old number disappear into the cloud. Every account, bank, utilities, social media, got a fresh start, passwords more complicated than ever, each click a small barrier between me and what came before. I closed out the last bill in my name, the screen flashing confirmed in a way that felt both final and forgiving. But I wasn't just closing doors behind me, I was opening them for Tyler, too. We texted almost every day, sometimes in bursts, sometimes in quiet check-ins. I could hear a lightness creeping into his messages. He told me about a college he was considering, how he'd started a little side job walking dogs after school. He joked about buying his own cactus, something he couldn't kill no matter how hard life got. When I asked about home, he'd answer with a shrug I could almost hear, "Same old drama. Dad's quiet, Mom's exhausted. But I'm making a plan." We met at a coffee shop halfway between his school and my place. He ordered black coffee, because he thought it made him look older. We sat in a corner booth, sharing muffins and laughter, and for a moment I let myself believe the past might loosen its grip. I passed him a folder, financial aid brochures, job leads, college apps. We made lists, sketched out timelines. He scribbled notes, eyes bright with a kind of hope that felt brand new. One afternoon, as the city outside slipped toward spring, I messaged Marissa, "You'd be proud. Tyler's got plans. I think he's really going to make it." She replied with a selfie at Roxy's, raising a giant iced latte in salute. At night, alone in my apartment, I arranged my few possessions, dusted the cactus, brewed coffee just because I could. I let the silence wrap around me, a blanket instead of a shroud. Sometimes I missed the chaos, the noise, the sense that I was necessary to someone. But mostly, I reveled in the quiet strength of a life I was finally living for myself. Then, in the middle of April, the text came, "I turn 18 in 3 weeks. I'm ready." Tyler's words filled the screen, weighty and simple. I stared at them, heart swelling with pride and anxiety all at once. We'd spent so long preparing for this moment, bank accounts, backup plans, the list of what to pack on day one, that it didn't feel real. I remembered him as a kid, tracing patterns in the carpet, asking when things would get better. Now he was ready to make his own exit. I typed back, fingers trembling, "You're going to do great. I'm here for you, every step." For the first time I was counting down days not for myself, but for someone I loved. Each morning, I watered the cactus, made coffee, texted Tyler a new joke or a song to start his day. Hope can be small and stubborn, a plant on a windowsill, a key in your hand, the soft click of a door finally closing. There are moments you remember forever. The day your little brother chooses freedom is one of them. Some mornings slip away unnoticed, but this one was stitched into my memory before the sun even crept through the blinds. I'd promised Tyler, when he was ready, I'd be there, no matter what. April sunlight filtered through my kitchen window as I poured coffee, hands restless, checking my phone every few minutes for a sign. When his text arrived, just a single word, "Ready," I felt a wave of nerves and relief crash over me. My heart hammered as I grabbed my keys and headed out, the city hushed and hopeful at that early hour. Tyler left home the way all survivors do, quietly, methodically, without ceremony. He'd packed a single black duffel the night before, choosing only what he could carry, careful not to wake anyone. I pictured him moving through the old house, past faded photos, worn rugs, the places we'd both learned to tiptoe around silence and anger. There was no note, no goodbye, just the click of the door and the promise of something better. When I pulled up in front of the house, he was already waiting on the curb, hands shoved deep into his jacket, face pale but determined. He looked both older and younger than I remembered, like the kid I'd once carried on my hip and the young man he was becoming, all in one frame. I got out and hugged him hard, feeling how thin his shoulders had grown, how tightly he clung to hope. We didn't talk about what he left behind. Not about Mom's tired voice or Dad's rage, not about the memories that clung to every wall. Instead, I pressed my old red scarf into his hands, soft and worn from years of use. "You need this more than I do," I said, voice thick. "It's lucky, you know." He grinned, wrapping it around his neck. "You always said it kept you warm when nothing else would." I loaded his duffel into the back seat, and we drove away from the only home we'd ever known. The street was empty, quiet except for the crunch of gravel and the soft hum of the engine. Tyler watched out the window, lips pressed tight, but when we turned the corner and the house was out of sight, he let out a shaky breath. "Guess that's that," he said. Our first stop was the college campus, a self-guided tour, maps printed out, nerves stitched into every step. We wandered the halls, peered into dorm rooms, stood in line at the bustling student union. I watched Tyler take it all in, shoulders relaxing as the world opened up around him. Nora met us by the library, waving a greeting before vanishing inside for her morning shift. She squeezed my arm on her way by, a silent vote of confidence for both of us. We spent the rest of the day doing all the things I'd dreamed of as a teenager but never got to do with someone cheering me on. Shopping for dorm supplies, twin sheets, a cheap lamp, a stack of notebooks that still smelled of new paper. We ate burgers at a diner with red vinyl booths, laughing as Tyler tried to convince me he'd always liked pickles. He ordered a giant milkshake and wiped chocolate off his chin, grinning the way he hadn't in years. Over fries, we finally let our guard down. "I'm scared," Tyler admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "What if I can't do it on my own? What if I mess up?" I squeezed his hand. "You will mess up, sometimes. So will I. That's how you learn. But you're not alone, Ty. Not ever again." He smiled, eyes shining. "It's weird, isn't it? All this freedom. Feels heavy and light at the same time." We talked about everything, the good, the bad, the things we wanted to forget and the things we wanted to build. I told him about the cactus in my window, how it survived anything, how I hoped we would, too. He promised to visit every weekend, to text me pictures of every weird roommate and every good grade. When the sun dipped behind the buildings and the day grew soft and golden, we drove home in silence, headlights leading us into a future we'd build ourselves. The road was empty and open, and for once, the quiet felt like possibility instead of punishment. At my apartment, I made Tyler tea and let him claim the couch as his own. We watched a bad movie and laughed until our sides hurt, every sound a stitch in the fabric of our new life. That night, I tucked the red scarf around his shoulders as he drifted to sleep, whispering, "You're safe here. You always will be." In the dark, with my brother finally home, I realized that family could be chosen, protected, and remade. We were still learning how, one step at a time, but for the first time, I was sure we'd find our way. Sometimes, freedom is just the start, you still have to learn how to live it. Tyler and I had made it out, but I quickly discovered the world didn't pause for a moment of triumph. Instead, life crept in quietly, inviting us to decide what came next. Losing family doesn't mean losing love, sometimes it's how you find it again. The first news of our parents came not from them, but from a distant cousin I barely remembered. He called one Tuesday night, awkward and hesitant. Just thought you should know, your folks lost the house. I heard they're renting some place on the east side now. Not much space. I guess things haven't been easy. He trailed off, waiting for a response. I thanked him, my voice steady, heart strangely calm. It was information I had expected, in some shape or form. The house we'd both tried so hard to keep afloat had finally slipped beneath the waterline. A few days later, a letter arrived at my building, addressed in Mom's tight, looping script. The envelope was thin, the paper inside crumpled and stained. The letter was short, written in fits and starts, filled with old resentments and half-hearted blame. You made your choice, Emily. You abandoned us when we needed you most. Maybe someday you'll understand what you've cost this family. There was no signature, just a final, hurried sentence, I hope you're happy. For a long time, I stared at the letter. I waited for the usual sting of guilt, the temptation to defend myself, to fix everything, to return. But instead, there was only a quiet relief, a sense that I could finally put down a weight I'd carried for too long. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, unsure whether it was an ending or simply a marker in the distance I'd traveled. Tyler, meanwhile, began to thrive in ways I'd never dared imagine. His texts were brighter, peppered with stories about new friends and late-night study sessions, about his first paycheck from the library job, about the old professor who played chess with him every Tuesday. Getting an A in Psych, he wrote. Made it onto the intramural basketball team, even if I barely play. Sometimes he sent selfies, grinning, arms around classmates, a look in his eyes that made him look years older, and so much lighter. We made a new tradition of Friday pizza nights in my apartment. Nora and Marissa would join us, piling in with bags of chips and seltzer water, turning the tiny living room into a patchwork of laughter and music and half-finished board games. Nora brought plants, a violet for my windowsill, a peace lily for Tyler's dorm. Marissa always came with stories from her classroom, bringing the same warmth that had carried me through the worst of winter. I took joy in the little things, picking out my own dishes, hanging prints on the wall, watching my cactus bloom a single, stubborn yellow flower. For the first time, I started to decorate the space just for myself. Fairy lights over the kitchen window, a bright tea kettle, mismatched mugs. I found an old photo of me and Tyler as kids, faces sticky with popsicle, and hung it by the fridge. When I caught sight of it, I felt a fierce, quiet pride, not for surviving, but for choosing to live. Some days, the past still tugged at me. A song on the radio, the smell of burnt toast, or the first cold snap of fall could bring memories rushing back. But more often, the old ache was replaced by a steady, gentle peace. I learned to sit with silence, to enjoy the rituals of a home I made myself. It wasn't all easy. There were times when Tyler called late at night, panicked over a bad grade or a fight with a friend. Sometimes I'd catch myself worrying about our parents, where they'd ended up, if they were okay. But I no longer felt responsible for their choices. I could care, but I didn't have to fix everything. That, I realized, was another kind of freedom. One evening, after a quiet dinner with Nora, I finally let myself read Mom's letter again. This time, I felt only a small, sad relief. I had spent years waiting for understanding, for forgiveness, for some acknowledgement of the hurt we'd all endured. Instead, I gave myself what I needed, permission to move on. That night, Tyler texted me, I'm happy, Em. Hope you are too. The words landed softly, unburdened by expectation. For once, I didn't have to pretend. I walked into my kitchen, the photo of our childhood smiling down, and let myself breathe easy. The consequences of leaving weren't just about loss. Sometimes, they were about finding room for new things, joy, laughter, the chance to begin again. Family is what you choose. Sometimes, you find it right where you thought you'd lost everything. 2 years ago, I drove away from my childhood home with a single suitcase, hands trembling, not knowing if I'd ever feel settled again. Now, as the leaves tumble gold across the river and the world tips gently toward autumn, I find myself coming home on my own terms. The air by the river is crisp and sweet, sunlight flickering through the sycamores. I spot Tyler on a bench, his coat zipped tight, a small plant perched next to him in a ceramic pot. He grins as I approach, the same crooked smile he had as a kid, only now there's a new confidence in the way he carries himself, shoulders back, eyes steady, nothing left of the frightened boy who once clung to escape plans and backup phone chargers. We sit side by side, legs swinging above the water. The city glows on the opposite bank, lights just starting to blink awake as afternoon leans into evening. For a while, we're content to listen to the wind and the river's hush, letting the silence be gentle rather than strained. Tyler nudges the plant closer. It's a pothose. They're hard to kill, he says, half laughing. I figured you'd want something easy for the new place. I brush my fingers over the glossy leaves. It's perfect, Ty. Maybe it'll do better than my cactus did. He leans his head on my shoulder for a moment. You know, I think about it all the time, how close we came to getting stuck. It's weird, isn't it? How far away the past feels, even when it still knocks at the door sometimes. We talk about the future, his plans for grad school, my hopes of traveling, maybe somewhere warm this winter, just because I finally can. He jokes about learning to cook something fancier than instant noodles. I tease him about bringing a girl home someday, just to see what Aunt Marissa and Aunt Nora make of her. As the sun dips lower, we head toward the little campus cafe for coffee with Nora and Marissa. Inside, everything is warm and familiar, the hiss of the espresso machine, the sugar packets in bright colors, the swirl of cinnamon on my cappuccino. Nora arrives with her usual quiet energy, a book tucked under her arm, while Marissa breezes in late, waving a half-eaten croissant and promising stories about her newest students. Our laughter fills the corners of the room, easy and unguarded, the sound of people who've chosen each other for all the right reasons. Later, we walk back to my apartment, mine, in every way that counts. The pothose goes on the kitchen counter, already trailing new roots. I show Tyler the tiny pinpricks on the wall where I've hung our childhood photo, right above a shelf filled with Nora's violets and Marissa's thrift store mugs. For the first time in my life, my home isn't built from what I had to salvage, but from what I've grown with my own hands, in my own time. As twilight settles in, I stand on my little porch, wrapped in a soft sweater, Tyler beside me. The sunset bathes the world in rose and gold, and I breathe it in, the color, the peace, the wild certainty that I am safe. I think about all the homes I once imagined, houses filled with shouting, rooms crowded with things I didn't want or need. This place, this life, is something I made for myself, and no one can take it away now. Tyler hugs me goodbye and promises to call tomorrow, his plant nestled in a bag at his side. Nora and Marissa linger for one last cup of tea. When the porch grows quiet, I close the door behind me, heart full, soul light. Tomorrow, I'll wake up knowing nothing can take this away, not anymore. I brew one last cup of coffee, candle flickering on the table, the pothose stretching toward the light. I take a moment to reflect, to feel the fullness of what I've built and the hope blooming in every corner. Maybe home isn't just a place, or even the people you're born to. Maybe it's found in the laughter you share over late-night pizza, or the trust you find in someone who brings you a plant for your windowsill. Home is what you build with patience and kindness, and sometimes, a little stubborn courage. What does home mean to you? For me, it's this quiet, golden moment, the taste of coffee, the promise of tomorrow, the certainty that I am loved and whole and finally, truly, home. As I stand in the quiet glow of my own home, I realize true peace often comes from letting go, and from opening my heart to new beginnings. Life has taught me that family isn't always defined by blood, but by kindness, forgiveness, and the courage to care for one another. Even when we face hardship or have to walk away, love finds a way back into our lives if we're willing to reach out and start again. If this story touched you or reminded you of your own journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your reflections below, or simply carry its lesson forward in your day.